I think that another quality is courage, and that is courage to do the right thing, to talk about the right thing for kids, no matter what is going on in the world or how politically charged the atmosphere must be. So those are a couple of things that stand out.
Welcome to the Education Matters podcast. I'm your host, Jason Bucheri, and today's guest is someone whose career in Edtech is nothing short of legendary. Andy Schaefer has spent over 25 years working alongside educators, school leaders, and innovators, helping to shape how digital technology supports teaching and learning across North America. Andy's experience is really unparalleled. He's been in more school districts and met with more education leaders than just about anyone I know. From his early days working on digital content delivery to his leadership in edtech companies like Discovery Education and Defined, Andy has had a front row seat to the evolution of education technology. And this metaphor is probably not the right one, because it's more like Andy hasn't just had a front row seat, but he's been behind the scenes helping to script, direct, and produce the very story that the rest of us have been watching unfold for the last 20 or 30 years. But his journey didn't start in the boardrooms of edtech companies or on conference stages at edtech events. It began in Marquette, Michigan, where he spent his childhood outdoors playing sports, building tree forts, and developing the kind of collaborative skills that would later define his personality and career. This episode is a must-listen for anyone in edtech looking to build meaningful partnerships with school districts, as well as for school district folks trying to understand how to become great district leaders. In this episode, Andy shares insights on the evolving role of technology in schools and what the best education leaders have in common. We also discuss the challenges of edtech adoptions, the importance of trust and relationships, and what truly moves the needle when it comes to supporting schools and students. Andy is one of the most thoughtful and respected voices in the entire edtech industry, and I'm thrilled to share this conversation with you. So without further ado, here's my discussion with the one and only Andy Schaefer. Well, Andy Schaefer, welcome to the Education Matters podcast. Thanks for joining, and maybe you can start by telling us where this podcast finds you.
Well, Jason, first of all, great to be here with you. And today I'm in Northbrook, Illinois, which happens to be where my office is located, and it happens to be very close to where I live. So great to be here.
Excellent. Thank you. So, Andy, maybe we can start with giving the audience a brief overview of you and the work that you're currently engaged in.
Yeah. So, well, as I mentioned, I'm in Northbrook, Illinois. I live just north of Chicago. I've been here outside of a couple of brief hiatuses, 25 or so years. I live with my wife and kids. Two of the kids are still in the house. One is happily at university. I also live near my parents and my sisters, who are just north of us in Milwaukee. Just some of the things, I guess, to know about me. I love my family, love sports, huge baseball and football fan in particular. Still like to stay active, weightlifting, paddle tennis for sure, and absolutely love to fish. When I think about mentioned sports, as you know, Jay, I'm a huge Green Bay Packer fan, huge Chicago Cubs fan. But on top of all that, I love my work. I've had the great privilege, for the last 25 years, to work with educators, to work with educational leaders every day, and it's just not something I necessarily knew I would be involved in when I was younger, but I wouldn't have it any other way. So that's a little bit about me.
Excellent. Thank you. And yeah, I definitely want to dive into that more, because I do feel that you're one of the rare individuals that has this really unique perspective on the, let's call it, North American education system, if I can even put it that way. You've probably been to more districts and met with more education leaders than anybody I can really think of. So I definitely want to dive into that. But again, just out of my own personal kind of fascination with biography and how people take the path they take, I want to ask you a few questions about your background. So let's start. Where and when did you grow up?
So, generally speaking, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, as a kid, formative years in Marquette, Michigan, which is in the Upper Peninsula, on Lake Superior, right on Lake Superior. And, for context, across from Thunder Bay. If you're looking at a map, it's about, and if you were going to drive from where you are, Jason, in Toronto, it's about 10 hours northwest. If you were, cutting through the Windsor and Detroit and making your way up through the Upper Peninsula. But I grew up there, and also very close to Sault Ste. Marie, where we'd go across the border and get our butts kicked in hockey every time that we went up there. So, but that's Upper Peninsula was a great place to grow up.
So tell me a little bit about that. Like maybe just with the question, like, how did you play as a child?
I think that the key word of, how we played as a child, Jason, was just pretty much nonstop. And that was winter or summer, but, we always found a way to be active. Of course, organized sports. I was involved in everything, baseball, football, hockey, basketball, soccer, you name it. But I probably actually was involved more even in the unorganized. Like when you had free time, we were in the yard. We were playing a variety of football, basketball, stickball, floor hockey, ice hockey in the streets. A neighbor of ours actually had an outdoor rink with boards, so we had that going for us. But then, kick the can, capture the flag, just tons of outdoor games. With just come one, come all, with the neighborhood. It was really, I should also mention that we built so many tree forts. It was like one of those things where you'd build them, tear them down, build them up again, make them bigger. And we use those tree forts for all kinds of different things, squirt gun, BB gun battles, just hanging out. But, there were tons of trails in Marquette too. So we certainly rode our bikes. And then when we of course got a little older, the three-wheelers, snowmobiles, just nonstop activity is really the best way I could describe like how I played and how we played as a child.
So is there anything about those experiences now that you were, or if I ask you to reflect on them, that you've kind of taken with you throughout your life, like just the kind of informal ways of learning with other children without, I imagine, the 70s and 80s, without much supervision?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to put it, because I think that routine, you get up, you leave the house. Sometimes the games were taking place in our yard, but it could have just as easily been, 10 houses down. But, that routine of leaving and being gone all day, and just finding something to do, or many things to do. And our only job was just be home for dinner, and it was like, reflecting back to what an awesome time that was. After dinner, you went out and did it again. You played as many games you could, the aforementioned kick the can, all those things, as late as you could until it was bedtime. So, those are some of the things that, and I tell my kids about this stuff all the time. I never want to hear, I'm bored. Find something to do.
Yeah.
The other thing that just I like to mention that about my childhood, and like so many of us at that time, after school, every day, every single day, you could race home and see the Cubs on WGN. So there's so many Cubs fans, across the U.S., so many across Canada, because you could see games. And that's also something I like to tell my kids about, because that's totally changed, and it's not quite as easy to catch the Cubs on TV, depending wherever you are these days.
Right, and I believe you told me this, and the main reason, but correct me if I'm wrong, is because they didn't have lights for the longest time, so they played a lot of day games, right?
That's correct. That's one of the reasons, but also just the tremendous distribution of the channel WGN. Right. Ranging all over the place. That is why you see Cubs fans, all over the world. But unfortunately, that distribution model has changed.
Well, that's awesome, and you certainly have conveyed to me your love of the Cubs and Wrigley Field, which is, I think, my favorite ballpark I've ever been to.
Fantastic place.
So is there anything about this kind of upbringing you had that you wish children had more of today?
Well, I think that yes, and I think that what a lot of kids default to their devices, doing something, and there's lots of great things they can do on their devices. Don't get me wrong, but it does keep kids on the couch, a lot more than I'd probably like, and probably a lot of other parents. And also just I think generally speaking, the connectedness of kids, wide groups of friends, and that it was just go out and see who's out there and who wants to play, and there's not quite as much of that. So I really wish that was more a part of the day to day for kids. And I also have to realize that I was growing up in Marquette, Michigan, with a much smaller population than suburban Chicagoland. little different story.
But it did sound like you had a really good peer group that you were all out and about together. Because
Sure.
I consider you really one of the nicest human beings I've ever met. And for the longest time, I kind of felt it was too good to be true. And I can kind of see where some of that came from, in the sense that you had to navigate this peer group, and those skills, I don't think they're generally innate, right? You have to kind of develop them. So I can kind of see where some of that came from. But if we can pivot now maybe to your more formal education.
Sure.
Anything about your education that stands out that comes to mind?
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about, so in K through 12, for example, I had 3 different schools. I had a kindergarten, went to for 1 year, public kindergarten. Actually went grades 1 through 8 to a place that no longer, well, at least a different name now, Bishop Baraga Central Grade School. My family was very religious. My dad did a lot of work for the church. So and then ultimately went to public Marquette Senior High School, one of the larger high schools in the Upper Peninsula. Then just after that, to follow in my family's footsteps, and many of them anyway, went to a small liberal arts college, went to university in De Pere, Wisconsin, called St. Norbert College. After that, just went on to Youngstown State University in Ohio. And that was where I went to graduate school. But, so that's just a path. But, things that stand out, again, this is probably mostly because of, being in that, at least in that grades 1 through 8, I had really small class sizes, which, we were very tight, very, very consistent group of students, grade 1 through 8, very little migration out. And then, I also remember that, being in a small school, our sports teams were very small, and that also benefited me too, because Jason, you know me. There's probably not very many basketball teams I'd be starting for, and that was one where I got the opportunity, to do something like that. But just other things. I still have great memories of certain teachers that were very influential to me. In those all through grades 1 through 12. I did love that move over to high school, though, and a big 2,000 student school, and athletics were different. They were more competitive. Having the opportunity to travel, throughout the UP and Lower Peninsula of Michigan, and being able to compete in a variety of different sports, I really loved that. So just those are a couple of things that stood out about just I don't know, that may be worth mentioning, I guess, for my K through 12 years.
Yeah, and if you reflect back on it, do you have an area, subject area, it could be even something as specific as a book that really you recognize as the first thing that you love to learn?
Sure. I really, I started, I guess my first love as a subject was really history.
Mm.
And there's a lot of different things about that. I loved, you name it, just everything about it was typically, you know, just history in general. But I remember when I got into middle school and one of my teachers, we had a project, and it was a history project making a time machine.
Mm.
And but I was told that I asked it, can I incorporate anything I want in this timeline? And teacher said yes. So I merged a combination of my love for sports history along with history. And when I put that all together, it was probably the best time I ever had making a project. I mean, I still remember it. And that anyway, that I know that helped grow my love for history, looking at it from all different aspects. And that certainly continues to this day. But also it's worth mentioning that I always loved math, and math was I know you don't hear that a ton, but I always did, and I'm very excited that my oldest son shares that love of math and he's studying at university today.
That's awesome. What was the time machine history project? Did it follow the Cubs back to the beginning?
It was a lot of the hey, Lou Gehrig's streak begins.
Oh, nice.
First Babe Ruth hits 60 home runs.
Yeah.
the things like that. And Jackie Robinson breaks the color barrier. Like I was really into baseball. I mean, there were a lot of things, but it kind of coincided with early 19th century history. So those are some of the things, Jay.
Yeah, I just asked because I wrote an essay in very much the same fashion, just the history of baseball, and I still remember that today. That's great. So, in terms of what you're doing today, what would you say that you studied that most impacts your work? You mentioned math, maybe it's history, but anything that you reflect on that structured the way you think that stays with you today in the work and play that you do today?
Oh, the obvious answer to that is because of the work I do, and I the from a high level business school, Youngstown State University, MBA program, impacts how I work every day. So that certainly had a great impact. But also looking back to what I loved, math and history, they play a part in what I do every day as well.
So is there anything about your education overall that you would change?
Not necessarily change. I look back at, I imagine my experience in, particularly K through 12 is similar to a lot of kids that were, growing up around the same time. I was going to school. I was taking the classes I was supposed to take, working my way towards graduation. But, I think one of the bigger differences, I never really connected it to what I was going to be doing later in my life or what career I would do. And how that impacted me, I certainly started my university days in the wrong major, and so that's like, I would have changed. I probably would have been a little more focused on, what do I want to do when I grow up, kind of scenario. Now I was able to reset and write the course and everything, and I have no regrets whatsoever. But that was, if I was going to change anything, I might have thought about that a little bit younger and explored a little bit further what I wanted to do. Also, I would mention that I wish I would have taken foreign language a little bit more seriously. We had the opportunity to take a lot of foreign language. I took the minimum, and if old Andy could tell young Andy, what would have been, it would have been a good thing to do. And then just what and again, no regrets, but I often think about, I've been in education for 25 plus years now. What would it have been like if I actually went into education first and then ended up in business? Just be curious. You and I have some, definitely mutual acquaintances, many who start on the education side, Scott Kinney, Jason Barnes, Philip McCullough, who all kind of ended up in the same spot, or I did today, but just from a different route. So I think about that sometimes. No regrets though, but those are some things I think about.
It's interesting. It's actually starting. It's an emerging theme of the podcast is that a lot of the folks that have been very impactful in education weren't sure what they were going to do early on. So I wonder if there's something there. But okay, so let's get the audience caught up to today. Can you kind of describe, what your
Sure.
career trajectory is like? Maybe we start with where you are and how you got there.
Sure. Just real quick history. When one of my great friends, John Joe Farragher, I really credit with getting me involved, in education. But his family owned a business called United Learning. United Learning was a publisher of educational videos. I actually was offered a job initially, and I didn't take it, and then because I wanted to finish school, came back and lo and behold, it was still available to me. So I ended up taking that role, and a lot of it was, the reason I was so piqued my interest so much was because it was about educational technology, and we worked together to create and distribute the first widely used video streaming service anywhere in K through 12 education. United Streaming was the name at the time. That happened, and of course we ended up being acquired by Discovery Education in 2003, and then I had a good 20 plus year run there, and late 2019, just before the pandemic, I joined up with some old friends and became president of the company I'm with now. At the time it was called Defined Learning. It's now called Defined. I'll just tell you a little bit about what we do, Jason. But we have, just from a big picture standpoint, our partners would tell you that we help students answer the question of why am I learning this? And what we do, we have a collection on the curriculum side, a collection of K through 12, all different subject area project-based units, where if you're learning, academic outcomes, and you might, like, for example, maybe you're learning something in geometry in 7th grade. An example I like to use, we might have that student be stepping into a role of an architect to complete that project. If they're learning something in computer science, we might have them step into a role of being a cybersecurity analyst. And really it's answering that question of how will I apply this to the real world down the line. So that is one thing. We also, because of our unique, we make careers a big important part of everything, starting as early as kindergarten. We developed another platform, because of our expertise in this and our expertise in project-based teaching and learning, called Defined Careers. And what we're doing with that is, helping students answer the question. I've touched on this, but what will I do when I graduate from high school? And really inform those decisions along the way. So we give students the opportunity to experience hundreds of different jobs, hundreds of different roles through project-based learning, day in the life of type experiences, also more comprehensive virtual internships. But the idea with all of this, is for all students, regardless of their background, to be able to see what's possible. Every classroom, every day, have the opportunity to see what I might do, and what do I like, what I don't, what do I not like. But to be able to see themselves in those roles, to see themselves working for a variety of different companies, or owning their own business, but along the way, developing those critical, durable skills that will help them succeed in life. So we also do a wide range of, as I'm sure won't be surprising to you, professional learning. We have a great platform called Defined Academy. So anyway, that's an umbrella. We also are helping, all of that's wrapped around with something called Defined Goals, that it helps our partners measure their progress towards global competencies, durable skills. Some people are developing this portrait of a graduate, and it helps monitor and track your progress and growth in those key areas.
Really, really interesting work, and I think really relevant work. One of the other themes that's emerging here is the need to connect the classroom now more than ever to what's happening outside the classroom. And I think Defined is kind of leading the way there. So really interesting work you're doing there. Whether it's through your experience with Defined or elsewhere, can you kind of describe to me what you have seen and feel the best classrooms look like, sound like, feel like?
Yes. I would say, generally speaking, the best classrooms look and sound like they're probably pretty loud. So I would say that you're going to see a lot of activity. Students are probably working together. There's probably opportunities to be working in small groups. They're probably doing a lot of presenting. They're likely, either building something either digitally or with their hands, but they're producing and publishing their work, in a variety of different ways. And most importantly, I guess, that their students are engaged. The students are happy. The students are smiling. The students are supporting one another. And just, the students are loving being where they are. And I think, actually, I said most important, but I think actually most important is that the facilitator is not lecturing. They're helping, just promote that learning, that process of joy that our friend Dean Sharesky likes to talk about.
Yeah, I was going to say that you and Dean are the two that have emphasized the joy and excitement, which I think is a huge part of the learning process that kind of gets left behind in all the focus on rigor and outcomes and those kind of things. So could you describe maybe in a little bit more detail for the audience some of the most inspiring things you've seen in your 25 plus year career? And I don't know if it's a fact, but have you been to every state? I know you've been to nearly every province. Have you been to every state?
I have not been to Alaska.
Oh.
So Alaska, look out! I'm coming one of these days.
I know we've had folks up there. Surprising you haven't been to Alaska, but other than Alaska, have you been anywhere else?
I think pretty much everywhere else. And I might be missing one or two, but yeah, certainly every province. I just it's been a great.
So I mean,
I had a great opportunity to explore.
Yeah, and as I feel very privileged, I mean, it's pretty remarkable to have that purview. So one of the things that I'm hoping to do in the podcast is kind of combat this public narrative that is so negative about education, even teachers themselves, because they don't have that kind of broad view that people like us have. So can you describe any of the most inspiring things you've seen?
Yeah. So, and I mean, the first, I think I answer this question the same every time. From how I've been inspired, some of the ways, I like to start with Dr. Mark Edwards. And I know Dr. Mark Edwards, but his work going all the way back to when I first started in the late 90s, the work he was doing in Henrico County Schools in Virginia, overseeing the first large-scale one-to-one laptop program, pretty much anywhere. And he was doing some groundbreaking stuff. I mean, the stories that I love listening to, and it was an Apple program, and I remember he had a direct line to Steve Jobs, and Steve Jobs wanted that thing to go well. I love hearing Mark talk about those days. And, what a legend he is in just education. He was there for a long time. Superintendent of the year in Virginia. Went on, continued his career in North Carolina in Mooresville Graded School District, where he really took it to the next level. Inspiring not only that community, but hundreds of districts, hundreds of superintendents benefited from visiting Mooresville during his time there. And then, of course, the organization AASA, which recognizes both Canada and the U.S., they're leaders of the year, superintendent of the year. Mark received that award, in part because of that work he did. And then, he went on to inspire folks in so many different ways. You and I think, probably together at some of the times when Mark had the opportunity to address large audiences at conferences or school districts, and as an author with Michael Fullen and others, just publishing great work, manuals. Like this is kind of how you get it done. So I like with Mark, but there's in others. I think about some inspiring moments such as being Dr. Kamala Patton in Collier County, Florida. Really being the first as a new superintendent embracing the idea of a digital textbook. We call it a tech book and to go all out on that was very inspiring and a place for other people to see. Others, John Malloy in his tremendous leadership in Hamilton Wentworth in Toronto, and not only was inspiring at the time, but then he had they made the improbable jump, I would say, to the U.S. and did it all over again in San Ramon Valley, California. And so just an incredible leader, inspiring to see what he's able to do, work with kids, work with other leaders, and then just, of course, just the opportunity, as I've visited so many places, Jason, so many great speakers, hearing from, inspirational leaders of districts, of school boards, like Louvel Brown, Steve Joel, Alberto Carvalho, incredibly inspiring stories from achievement gains in Miami and now in Los Angeles. Chris Kennedy in British Columbia. I mean, talk about a terrific, inspiring guy that you and I have had the opportunity to really connect with. And then from I mentioned Dean Sharesky, Hall Davidson, different people that really. There's so many good things happening, and it's great to hear about them. You have the opportunity to be on the road a little bit like that. Most recently, I'll say, and you can stop me here, but Dr. Melvin Brown in Montgomery Public Schools in Alabama, and the work they're doing with aligning instruction with everyday with future workforce needs. But what really inspires me all the time, Jason, is just visiting classrooms, and I've seen so many good ones across Canada, across the U.S. that have been just that really does keep you going when you see some of the great work that's happening that doesn't get reported on.
Yeah, and I really wish that's something that every teacher could do, like a North American program to get teachers moving around and seeing the work that's happening, so they don't feel so isolated and siloed, because just like you, have been inspired by seeing the great work across the continent, really. So Andy, you mentioned a good number of educational leaders, many of whom have been on the podcast and will be on the podcast. But is there anything in terms of what you feel is like the core of what makes great leaders? You yourself have been a leader in two very big organizations. You work with educational leaders, pretty much every day. What are the core qualities that you find in really great leaders?
I'll just name a couple, Jason, but we talked about inspiration. I think great leaders have the ability to inspire others, to not only succeed what they're doing now, and really grow systems, but they help build that future generation of leaders. I mentioned Mark, of course, but I think about a guy like now retired, but Terry Greer, who is a superintendent in many school districts. I think I might even have this low. I might be understating his impact, but I think there's at least 60 people that worked on his staff that have went on to be superintendents / directors of education, wow. Which is just unbelievable. And that's the kind of leadership that inspires others. And Bill Hogarth, Bill Gartland, inspirational leaders who had so many on their teams, go on to be great directors. And then I think that another quality is courage, and that is courage to do the right thing, to talk about the right thing for kids, no matter what the is going on in the world, or how politically charged the atmosphere must be. So those are a couple of things that stand
out. Excellent, and I think that's a super important point, because it's easy to say or easy to do one thing in the moment, but the great leaders have the courage to do the right thing in the moment. So I think that's a really great point. A big portion of the audience here is going to be the Edtech community. And I consider you really to have this wonderful historic perspective, because you were there really at the start of Edtech. What would you say was, the state of Edtech when you started to now? How has that progressed? What does it look like over the years you've been working?
I think just kind of generally speaking, there's just people were getting excited just to see technology. When I first started, it was the wow factor. There's just been a tremendous, significant growth in the amount of technology that's now available in classroom. There was just things like virtual schools, another thing that were like just emerging. And now there's just myriad online and hybrid learning opportunities that were just, in its infancy stages, in the late 90s. I think that tools have allowed classrooms to become more student-centered. But I like just, going back to like the things that we were doing back in the late 90s, early 2000s, just to, whether it was, we'd be spending time on the phone talking people through downloading a Windows media player or a QuickTime, and that's how you're going to watch a video. Like, how do I do that? It was like things like that, and and now it's just it's just ubiquitous. So I mean that, and there's so many options, and a lot of that is driven by the kids. A lot of that is driven by how proficient our young ones are in technology. So. They've always been ahead of us, but they're a big driver there.
Yeah, I interviewed Hall, and he said the pause button on a VCR required PD and inspired awe by teachers. So,
yes.
Yeah, it certainly has changed quite a bit. What would you say the best EdTech companies have in common? What's part of the secret sauce to a really great EdTech company?
That's a great question. I think that the best ed tech companies, Jason, regardless of what they're doing. I mean, we have folks that are doing content like us, or software, staffing, busing, green energy, you name it. But there's so much happening in ed tech. But the common thread, I think, is those that are mission driven. Because there's tons of great technology, but how does that apply to improving teaching and learning? The mission-driven companies are going to make that happen. And then I also think that the best companies have great relationship people, and that's at every customer touch point. So whether you're in sales or support or implementation, whatever you want to call it, the great relationship people, and those that form lasting partnerships with districts are the best companies. And we've all seen it, but those companies that are able to navigate like things such as district turnover, because of the strength of the relationship and the endeavoring to help your partners meet those goals, are some of those common threads.
And then on the flip side, what would you say are the common mistakes that ed tech companies make?
Not understanding the goals and objectives of your target audience. That's number one thing. If you are, I mentioned that wow factor before. That's really not going to get it done today. But if you are fortunate enough to start a partnership, some tech companies make the mistake of not providing enough post-sale support, just to put it bluntly. The focus on success, it's mutually beneficial. And then, the increased focus. People have to be thinking about, EdTech companies need to be thinking about research. So, focused on outcomes. How are we improving education, whether it is actual growth in math and reading and so on, and science, growth in engagement, improving teacher practice, whatever that metric is, that research, not being focused enough on that. And then and there's nothing wrong with this. There's nothing wrong with, being acquired or having private equity or whatever it is. These are things that can really take some companies to the next level. But at times, some organizations are too focused on being acquired rather than being focused on the mission.
Excellent. And that's a fantastic point. And I would say that was part of the keys to the success of the teams we've been on over the years, are really focused on the mission. And I just want to emphasize that for the audience, because I work with a lot of startups, and I don't think they appreciate and understand how difficult it is to navigate the EdTech world. So I think that emphasis on focusing on really quality partnerships and focusing on the mission of the teachers and students are the keys to success. So let me ask this kind of follow-up question. Why are implementations so difficult? Are there any kind of keys to successful implementations that you could kind of name or outline for us? Every situation is different, but some of the things I think about are, for any implementation, let's call it, you have to build consensus amongst a variety of different stakeholders. Really who is impacted by this. And then when you're looking at, as a school board or school district, you're trusting a partner. And you have to understand that you're in both sides. You're in it together, and you're partnering to meet goals and objectives. The keys to success is not like, hey, we brought you in, now get it done. It's actually right. The ones that are most successful do have that. Where leaders on both sides stay involved. The goals and objectives of partnership need to be clearly outlined. They need to be measured, and they need to be checked regularly. And it's going to be it's not going to happen overnight. So you can call it transformation, you call it whatever you want, but it takes time. And then you also recognize that not all stakeholders will move forward at the same pace. And so you have your early adopters to your laggards, and you have to build that into your whatever you want to call it, a future 5-year plan. But organizational leaders on both sides need to stay involved in every aspect. And I think you pointed to a really important thing that I think everybody takes for granted in the process, is that it takes time. Just by agreeing to partner doesn't mean that there will be a successful partnership. So on that note, is there anything you wish educational leaders understood a little bit more about either the EdTech world or the adoption or implementation process?
I think at this point, it is most district leaders really understand these things pretty well. They understand what's happening with EdTech. They understand what's happening with adoption processes. But I do think, particularly probably for a newer leader, they need to stay involved. No matter how incredibly busy you are as a district leader, for example. I think the effective leaders and effective implementations have those that when they stay involved in decision making, even when there's committee, you're trusting a committee. But even committees need to be checked. Companies need to be checked. Are we moving forward in the right direction? Are the decisions we're making consistent on a day-to-day basis with the vision that we started out with? So those are something. And then the aforementioned. You do need to get everybody on the same page. You're going to do it because I say you're going to do it. Doesn't always work. And, some stakeholders think they can outlast this new thing or this,
Right.
this new initiative,
Yeah.
this one more thing. It can't be
Mm-hmm.
one more thing. It has to
Mm-hmm.
be part of your overall strategic plan, your vision, and you have to look and support, to best you can, all the different folks that are impacted, and that they are all important to this process.
Excellent. So, what would you say, in your experience, do the best districts do differently to support those implementations and to make it not, just one more thing? Because my mom, who taught for 40 years, told me that very early. She's like, it just felt like, this literacy and numeracy ping pong. And then she's like, after 15 years, I just closed my door, and I knew how to teach the kids, and she felt a lot of it was noise. So how do the best leaders and best districts kind of punch through that noise, and really make lasting change?
So, I mean, the focus on systemic coherence, I think is super important. So, and that just means you have a clear and digestible strategic plan that everybody can understand. I mentioned Bill Gartland before. He had an awesome strategic plan in Eastern Ontario. With one page, everyone could understand it. It was featured in one of Fullen's books. I can't remember which one at this point. But having that clear and digestible strategic plan, and then also you are supporting and trusting your building leaders to execute on that plan. If everybody has a shared vision, and that it's clear how what you're bringing in supports your strategic objectives, and it's going to help get you there either faster or better, that is going to get everyone on the same page. But when I talk about your building leaders, those are your champions that are taking it down to the teachers, and ultimately the students. If you're putting too much on them for individual decisions or, coherence, that we're doing this as a system, we're doing this together, and we're going to do everything we can to execute on this plan. So those are a couple of things that are stick out, but also those that make ongoing professional development a priority. That is absolutely key. And then you're also building in the supports, for not only your teachers, but for all students to have an equitable opportunity to succeed in these types of implementations.
Well, I want to cut that and send it to every politician that funds our education system, because I don't think they understand how important that professional learning aspect is to achieve the vision. And oftentimes what I hear is, we don't have the funds for the learning. Got the tech, you got the devices, you got the structure, but then they struggle to implement because they just don't have the bandwidth. So I might cut that and send it to a few Ontario politicians here. But Andy, if I can ask you to do something that's very difficult right now, and I know this is not in any way a science, but can you look forward? Can you imagine the world 50 years from now? And can you tell me how you see education? Now, you can take this any way you want. You can give me the good, the bad, the ugly, or all of the above.
So 50 years from now, how things look different. I think, Jason, one of the things, if you look back, 50 years ago, I think the next 50 will advance a lot more quickly than the last 50 has. Just, maybe like something simple, like the Sammer model. When we started, like, kind of this explosion of technology in the late 90s to where we are today, a lot of it has been about, substitution, augmentation, some move into modification with cloud-based tools, real-time feedback, additional opportunities to collaborate. But I think that, one of the things that we'll be seeing is that redefinition is going to be a lot more possible because of technology, bringing in, making AR and VR ubiquitous. I've talked about this a lot, but the career connected piece too. companies are struggling with building their workforce pipeline. The companies are having trouble filling roles that are available in their own communities, and in so many are trying to address that. I talked about Dr. Melvin Brown in Montgomery, Alabama, doing such a great job with that. But we're going to see more career-connected education. There's no doubt about it, because it's a problem that has to be addressed by everybody, and that when you're learning, that you are along the way preparing your future workforce. I think that's going to be a big deal. We're already getting virtual environments are going to be ubiquitous. I think assessments will continue to improve, identifying strengths, interests at younger and younger ages. The types of assessments that continue to grow, be more performance based. How you actually, performing in real world scenarios. So those are some things that I think about that aren't necessarily the Jetsons, but just things that are going to be happening, but also for better or worse, I think that although it's picked up somewhat in the last post pandemic, but generally speaking, there's been a downward trend in folks attending university, traditional colleges and universities. And I think that unless costs get in line and unless benefits get in line for attending, and this is particularly in the U.S., mind you, where the costs spiral out of control. But there's just, you have tough decisions to make, and such an important one that I think enrollment will ultimately dip unless those things change.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more there. And like I do with you and all our other American friends and colleagues, I say, send your kids up to Canada. Even as an international student, you'll pay far less and probably get as good, if not better, an education.
Tremendous option.
I don't think anyone's taken me up on that, though. I'm trying to think. But anyway, let's now. You went from what you see, and I think that's a pretty accurate picture of what I can foresee in terms of, the importance of career connectedness. I'm not sure we can overstate that enough. I mean, the economy depends on folks having a sense of how they can really fit into a workforce that deals with global problems in a more connected way. So I think that's an excellent point. And you, out of anyone, has a really unique perspective on that, given what you're doing at Define. But if I can ask you, if you had a magic wand and could make any changes to education, to the system, what would you do? How would you make every classroom look like?
There's I think one thing I like that I really like to bring up that I don't know if everyone agrees with this, but my number one thing, like if you look at, the different kinds of schools, the different kinds of communities, wealthy communities, poor communities, different environments, like my number one thing would be, no matter where you're going to school, would be to whatever's happening in that classroom, whatever's happening in that school day, would be to eliminate the need for parents to invest their own dollars in tutors. Not that I think tutors are awesome. I think that, that's personalized learning, personalized assistance, but all parents want their kids to succeed. And let's face it, there's some people that have the money to afford to improve their students' chances by, spending dollars outside of the K through 12 day. And that's another inequity, unfortunately. And I think what we should endeavor to give every student what they need, and I think it's possible, and I think a lot of people are doing it, but that would be one. If I could wave a magic wand, I would eliminate the need for anyone to have to seek assistance outside of the school day if that makes sense, Jason. And then the other thing I would do, like I mentioned before, if I could wave a magic wand, would be just get the cost of higher education in line.
Way down. Yeah. Well, I think those are a couple wonderful notes to end the podcast on, but before we wrap up, I know you're always reading, watching some really interesting stuff. Any recommendations you have for the audience? Book, movie, podcast, album, all the above?
Okay, so can I give you a couple?
Please.
Okay, so I'll start with podcast. The podcast is called Acquired. I don't know if you've heard of it, but like there's a couple that are just awesome. There's so many, but check out the one on the NFL, the history of the NFL from Acquired. It's awesome. Who knew what Teddy Roosevelt had to do with the creation of modern football? So I'll leave you with that. You listen.
That's a great hook.
Yeah, and then the other one is Acquired, same podcast, but the history of Costco. And I don't know how familiar you are with Costco, but it's it's an incredible story of kind of the creation of the Supercenter. And how it started, how it's grown, and how it's evolved into all these different companies across the world. It's a great one. I'll give you two quick book recommendations. One is King, A Life by Jonathan Ive. It's just Martin Luther King, incredible individual. This book delves into things that were previously unavailable from other authors. It is just an incredible story of his life, his commitment to nonviolent protest, his commitment to love. Awesome, inspiring book. And then The Last Hero about the Henry Aaron, I should say, is pretty called Henry Aaron story. Couple things. And then, hey, most people probably know this, but the Johnny Cash has a new album out this year, just based on unearthed studio recordings, and it is, I can't remember what it's called, Songwriter. It's called Songwriter, but check it out because it's probably gonna be the last time we have an opportunity to hear a new Johnny Cash album. So
I mean, this is why we always get along. You just named three of my heroes right there, and I did not know the Cash album was coming out. So with that, Andy, perfect ending. Thank you so much for your time.
Great to be here. Thanks so much, Jason, and I look forward to connecting again soon.
This podcast is recorded on the territory and Treaty 13 lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and on the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee. The show is edited and produced by the marvelous and talented Andrew Mastroianni. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe to us on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next time, remember, there's absolutely no inevitability as long as there's a willingness to contemplate what's happening. I'm your host, Jason Bucheri. Until next time.